Do we have Amber's, yours on? No.
Okay. Do we have your...
Oh, we should. Do we have it on the
Do we have it?
And if we don't, I can talk about it without you. It should be on. Let's see.
I think you put it on his laptop.
Well, we can switch machines if you need.
Can you get that? Okay. We're having a little nod moment of technology.
Well, I can talk a little bit about. Yeah, I can start, and if we can get the slideshow.
Password here?
Yeah. So we can stay on schedule. I can get going.
I don't know. You kept it on me.
I have my laptop in the other room, and we can. If CJ, if you want to grab my laptop, then I can plug it in. It has the same.
I think that
I've got the same plug. So.
I'm going to introduce you while we're screwing around with technology.
Okay, so what Hank said, number one, is that change isn't going to happen until we all work together to make it happen, right? So I always tell people about putting your money where your soul is, right, guys? So if you think something can be changed, use your pocketbook, right? Because if money doesn't flow where the energy goes, it won't go there anymore, right? So I know that there's only 80 people here today, but if the world would just figure that one out, I think you'd see massive change quickly. So we're going to have Amber Big come back when she gets her presentation. Amber is a sustainability expert, and she's a green business consultant and strategic marketing consultant. Ms. Big works in the San Francisco Bay Area on cutting-edge projects, including fibershed.org and thefoodcommons.com. These projects use technology to relocalize production of products, and she will be a great resource for local farmers, food producers, restaurant managers, chefs, and more. So we can have Amber start until we can get the presentation going.
Hi. So I'm a mom, and part of my commitment to being a mom is ensuring that I have a future for my children, their children, and many, many generations forward. I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico, and New Mexico is very, very isolated, a lot like Hawaii, and we basically had to produce most of our own food. It was really expensive to bring in food. We were about a 4-hour drive from any major urban center. The economy was based on mining. So in 1995, the mines closed, and 75% of the economy basically collapsed, and everyone went elsewhere. We had an extractive resource economy, and I think that's the dominant paradigm in the world, where we extract resources from communities, and this is the model of colonialism. Oh, great. So we have a world, an economy created on the principles of extraction and colonialism, where wealth is extracted from a community, taken somewhere else, and aggregated into the hands of a few, where the most of the people who provide that wealth, where the wealth comes from the earth, from the people, from the resources, it's taken away. And those people are left with very little. And that happens across the world, and we've seen that happen. And that is a model that cannot survive long term. So what I want to talk about is how we can flip that model on its head and create new models that actually work, that actually provide wealth and retain wealth for communities where that wealth is created. So the first conversation I want to have is, what is local? Well, local is defined based on how we define those boundaries. What are those boundaries? For example, in Hawaii, there's the local, which is defined by the watershed. And so the watershed is where water comes down the mountain. And so historically here, I believe that there is this idea of a community is based upon the watershed. And that is pretty much wherever you go in the world, in native communities, the community, the tribe, the people have their own watershed. And that's how you define a community, is by the watershed. Where does the water flow from? And where is water captured, and how is water used? And that is the original definition of local. And then beyond that, the water supports the food shed. So food is dependent on water, so you have your food defined by the watershed. And that is what I would define as local. And even beyond that, you can actually grow fiber. And fiber sometimes, depending on the fiber, is less reliant on water than food is. So then your fiber shed is even bigger. And so that really, when you look at an economy, when you look at a sustainable economy, you need food, you need water, fiber. that provides your housing, your clothing, the basic necessities of life, is water, food, and fiber. You can build your houses, you can build your clothes, you can eat, you can do pretty much everything you need. And then sunlight is your energy. So I define local as within your watershed, food shed, and fiber shed. So the keys to a successful local system. The first key is vertical or virtual integration, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit. The second key is community investment. The third key is consistent brand and marketing. That's basically communicating and sharing what you have. And the fourth key is accountability. And then the fifth key is the most important, and that is stewardship. So the first model I want to talk about is a project that I've been working on for over 3 years, and it's called the Fresno Food Commons. And the Food Commons is basically a principle of business development, where the entire supply chain for a food system is integrated within the community. The second principle of it is basically building a network of a national network of these regional food systems, so that every single food system supplies itself, but the administrative costs, the branding, the marketing, all of those, what I would say the softer side of it, not the actual logistical sides, but the big picture side, is shared across this national network. But the food system itself is owned, stewarded, and maintained by the people in the community. Here's what it looks like. Basically what you get is from the farms, you get the farms providing the resources for a central local aggregation center where you process food, you maintain food, or basically you store food, you divide it up, and then you send it out to either your regional grocery store or to the local markets or directly to the consumers. Or people come into the store and then they basically can buy the food from their local community. The key is creating these systems that work with local farmers, provide value back to local farmers, and that the local farmers and the consumers are the owners of that system. So there are 3 principles within the Food Commons vision and the Food Commons model. There's the Food Commons Fund, the trust, and the corporation. And these are all interconnected. So the trust owns the land, the fund provides the financial resources to get these small food businesses going, and the corporation is what actually manages the logistics of producing the food, bringing the food to the aggregation and distribution center, and then selling the food to the consumers. And the corporation is owned by the people that live in the community. So it is defined by a multi-stakeholder co-op. So unlike, similar to a worker co-op, it is broader than a worker co-op. It's not just the workers who own it, it's everybody in the community who's part owners. And there's a lot of ways to create that financial structure and the legal structure to make that happen and make that viable. When you have people in your community owning your corporations, those corporations perform to meet the needs of that community. They don't extract wealth. The wealth is retained in the community, so all the decisions of the corporation are based on optimal benefit for the community. You're not going to basically allow your company to pollute your own backyard. You're not going to basically dump crap into your waterways that you're drinking from, because you're in charge. So this is what it looks like. It's basically a vibrant hub that provides not just food, it's a community resource center. It provides education, it's a central meeting place, because historically people meet around food. We meet around our markets. That is where community comes together. And so when we recreate that in today's society, using the greatest and latest in modern technology to be efficient in our farming practices and be efficient in our water use, we can create this amazing, amazing hub of activity, of education, of culture, and of food that nourishes our communities. So the core hub functions are training. There are other functions. This is, for example, an actual farm, a hydroponic farm, with a food hub in it. This is a model that some architecture students designed based on some of these principles that we were discussing. And there's the food hub trust and bank. So basically the other key is making sure that your banking system is localized. so that the financial benefit, the financial return is returned back to the community rather to Wall Street. And then there's also business services, training, kitchens for small food companies to get started so that they can have resource use of these small kitchens and small food production facilities. And then the other key is making sure that when people are coming to the island, because Hawaii is a beautiful island for visitors to come visit and be part of, and the interesting thing is most visitors don't think about the local place, except that they go to a place because they want to experience that local place. And so why not tell them, this is the richness of our culture through our food. And sharing what the farmers provide. This is a model in California for point-of-purchase signage, which is key to increasing the local economy. And this is a simple thing that small businesses can do. So you can just put on your a sign on your products at the point of purchase saying, this is local. And statistics show that it actually drives up sales by 3% at least. This is what it looks like in context. And these are some of the systems that we're designing for Fresno. So you can see how far it came, the number of hours it took to get from the farm to the retail market, and that it's all the certifications. The other model I want to talk about is the fiber shed model. And this is a model that I've been involved in the last year, and we just finished the first draft of a feasibility study 2 nights ago at 2 o'clock in the morning. First draft was done for a regional wool mill in California. There hasn't been a vertically integrated wool mill in California since the early 1900s. And before that, there were a number of wool mills because California is the largest wool producing state in the US. And we have this huge resource in California, but over the last 50 years, there has been a 90% decline in wool producing sheep in the US. And so the sheep numbers have tanked. And the primary reason is, again, globalization, resource extraction, and in the US, there's been a move to synthetics. So technology is great, but there's an inappropriate use of technology at times. And one of the big issues with synthetics is every time you wash your clothes, the nanoparticles from the synthetic fibers actually goes into the laundry runoff. And when you go through the sewage treatment plants, they can't filter that out. So that goes straight into our oceans. And now it is a #1 source of plastic pollution in the ocean is the synthetic particles from your clothes. So if you want to reduce ocean pollution and plastics in the ocean, we have to stop wearing synthetics. We have to stop putting oil into our clothes. Petroleum is what is running our clothing economy, not just our fuel economy. And textiles is the #2 source of freshwater pollution on the planet from dyeing. So this is a huge, huge problem. Not only the social implications of all of the workers that have been treated so poorly through the history, the last 30 years of textile production, it is a sick, sick system. So changing our practices from what we eat to what we wear to localized systems is critical. So there are successful models. New Zealand is really successful at producing this amazing wool resource, and they have over 30 million sheep in New Zealand that produce tons and tons of wool. Why are they successful? They advertise. They market themselves really well. Australia is really successful because the Woolmark brand is a sign of luxury. They're very, very clever at how they communicate. And this is a key message to remember. It doesn't take rocket science to communicate effectively. It's really about sharing your message and making sure that that message is communicated to everyone else. And if that's all you do, you can increase your sales by 3%. There's also the myth of overseas competition or overseas production being more competitive, that it's cheaper to make things overseas. It's not cheaper. Those costs are externalized, and they're now becoming less externalized because the cost of oil has gone up. So the cost of transporting things has gone up. One of the big questions I have is, why doesn't Hawaii have a dairy? And somebody said, well, it's not competitive. There's 2 dairies? Good. There's 3 dairies. I didn't know that.
There used to be more.
But why don't we produce our own milk here and sell it? Why isn't this not large scale? Because somebody said, well, it's cheaper to bring milk over. And I said, I don't think so. I don't think it's cheaper. I think somebody just hasn't done the proper marketing to build up those dairies and invested the resources to making those dairies happen. There needs to be people who say, I want to farm cows, and I want to basically be a dairy farmer, and there needs to be people saying, you know what, we're going to invest in our dairy farms.
And the dairy land was sold for expensive homes.
There you go. And that's extraction of resources, because that home, that space, is extracted to somebody who lives somewhere else. So we need to reinvest in those dairy farms, we need to reinvest in our farms so that we have the affordable milk. Because it is more affordable to produce here. It actually is. And there's some myths that need to be deconstructed. When you sit down with the numbers, it's amazing to see that it's actually affordable. And that's what I do, is I sit down with these numbers and figure out these systems. Because when you get down to it and create, use the new technology, invest in your systems appropriately, it actually becomes more affordable. This is a great example. This was in the New York Times, that it actually costs less to produce fabric in the US than it does in China. And so the fabric, in Asia, the fabric production is more. And it costs more to produce a hoodie, but this is actually coming down. It's only more to produce the hoodie in the US because the cut and sew is higher. But the fabric production, 100% vertically integrated fabric, is actually cheaper to do in the US than overseas. And part of it the main reason is because of the cost of oil. Transporting things is expensive. But we've basically externalized those costs to taxpayers, we've externalized those costs to the environment, we've externalized costs along the way. When you do a true costing of, for example, of a McDonald's value meal, the actual value is $1.50 more than the price paid. Or the actual cost is $1.50 more than the price paid. So McDonald's wouldn't make a buck if we actually forced McDonald's to internalize those costs. Everybody's paying for these externalized costs because we push everything out. And the thing to remember is that there is no over there. In San Francisco, we export our trash to China. But you know what? It's coming back to us through the ocean. We're having plastic wash up on our beaches. There is no over there. We live on one planet. And this is the great Buckminster-Fuller principle. We live on spaceship Earth. We're flying through the galaxy on this little spaceship called Earth. And this is all we've got. And it would be great to terraform Mars and the moon eventually. We're not there. And we may not have time to develop the technology to get there. But right now, we're on spaceship Earth, and we've got to make sure that we don't have any over there. We have to create closed-loop systems. So one of the things we're trying to do is create a closed-loop mill. And this is called the soil-to-soil principle, because whatever comes from the soil has to go back to the soil. And if we create a soil-to-soil stewardship cycle, then we create a sustainable system, and that's the only way to do it. If we externalize anything, we are creating a sick system. So it's very interesting to look at a soil-to-soil system. This is what the wool mill is trying to do right now. So basically, the grasses and the rangeland feed the sheep. The sheep are sheared, it goes into the wool mill that's run off of 100% renewable energy. And then it goes into the designers and makers. We're also using technology right now that will reduce our labor costs by using basically 3D knitting machines. You can do seamless knits and creates really beautiful garments. You send a computer file to the printer, to the knitter, and the knitter knits from the wool, and you have no waste because you have no cutting. You don't actually cut the fabric, so you reduce your waste, you optimize for performance with these machines. And then you go into the garments. The garments, if they're 100% natural fibers, can be composted. And then you get this amazing compost that goes back into the rangeland. You apply to the rangeland, and when you apply compost to the rangeland, it actually supports root growth for the grasses that sequesters more carbon. We just did an LCA on this fabric cycle, on this process. If you apply compost to the rangeland every 5 years, each garment can sequester almost like 40 kilograms of CO2 per garment. So that's 60 times its own weight in CO2.
Wow.
And in contrast, the best Patagonia performing garment actually emits 40 times its own weight in CO2. That's Patagonia, which is touted as one of the most sustainable clothing companies in the US or in the world. So this is a model that needs to exist. So the question is, why do people buy local, and how do we do this? The number one reason people buy local is to support their local community. And you got to remember that it's okay, and people are willing to pay up to 25% price markup for local goods Some people can't afford that, so you got to figure out systems that bring the cost of production down and make it affordable. And the key is investment, because you invest in new technology, you invest in the systems that optimize for efficiency and performance, you bring those costs down. They're long-term investments. The ROI is not 3 years, the ROI is 50 years. The return on investment is sometimes 10 years. Sometimes it's a year, if it's a right system, like the geothermal heat pumps. My uncle's factory in Chicago invested in a geothermal heat pump that basically cut his energy cost down to zero, because he was spending $150,000 a month on electricity to cool his factory. And he installed one of these geothermal heat pumps, and basically within a year it paid for itself. Because he spent $1 million on it, but it was worth it. So the Hawaii context is really interesting to me, because less than 8% of the food that's grown here is eaten here. That needs to shift. And yes, there's a lot of food imported. Costco is doing a really good job of that. Why not create the Hawaii Costco that basically pulls from the local farms and basically starts producing for the local residents? CSAs are really good models. But there's some advantages. There's ways to do this that are efficient, and there's ways to do this that are not efficient. And the key to this is organizing and creating a vertically integrated system. And it doesn't have to be one company that owns it all. It can be virtual integration as well, and there's strengths and weaknesses to both. I'm not going to get into it because I'm running out of time. But the virtual integration is basically when you use technology to aggregate the resources of small businesses to basically create one consistent supply chain. It takes planning, it takes work, and it takes thought leadership. But you guys have that. So there's some really great tools, and I want to talk a little bit about some of them. There's, for example, the EcoTrust Food Hub is one tool that can be used for virtual integration. There's also Local Dirt, and they both have apps, phone apps. So basically it's a supply chain tool for food buyers and distributors to basically buy from local farms, and local farms can basically list what they have going into production, when they're going to be harvesting, what's going to be harvested, and then the food buyers can actually go on those apps and pre-order, kind of like a CSA, but on like a wholesale CSA, and Local Dirt does the same thing. And they're actually competing apps, but they're both great. And Food Hub is developed by EcoTrust out of Portland as part of seeing the ecosystem as our most valuable resource. Also, I wanted to say that both of those tools are great for marketing, because you can sell direct to consumers that way too, and that cuts out middlemen even further. So community financing is key, and this is what I want to reiterate, is that yes, you can implement tools and technology, but you really have to define your ownership structure so that the incentives are in the right place. So that the incentives for stewardship go back to the community. And so that looks like a bunch of different ways to do this. There's shareholders, like you can create a direct public offering, which is basically your shareholders are only within the state where the company is run. You can create a CSA model where you have your local consumers pre-purchase products. There's credibles.com, which is a really great tool for developing that. It's a fundraising tool to basically, it's like a crowdsourced CSA online tool. So it's through the slow money movement. And then cooperative ownership is key. It doesn't have to be just farmer co-ops like in Japan. The big agricultural organization is a cooperative ownership model through the farmers owning that huge co-op. And they have the largest lobby in Japan for agriculture. It's huge, it's powerful. And some people say corrupt, but that happens. And then there's also the nonprofit ownership. So you can have a nonprofit which serves the community be the owner of a vertically integrated system or a virtually integrated system. And so basically what I want to reiterate is these are the keys to local systems. Integration, vertical or virtual, community investment, consistent branding and marketing, accountability, which is defining your systems, using brand standards, using the organic standards or any other like Food Alliance standards, and then stewardship.
All right.
That's it.
Good job.
I'm sure Amber has a lot more resources and things to say about vertical and virtual integration, so you can feel free to talk to her at lunch. We have time for maybe one question, 2 questions. Yes?
What group in Fresno, I have family who live in Fresno, what group in Fresno contacted you to develop that model, and where's it at in its implementation?
Right now, we just finished the feasibility study. So it's a part of the business council in Fresno and the mayor's office. It was funded through the 11th Hour Foundation, or the 11th Hour Project, which is the Schmidt Family Foundation. And Fresno was chosen because it is one of the most productive regions in the world, food-wise. And very few of the people in Fresno retain the wealth of that food production. So that is why Fresno was chosen. The group reached out to the mayor's office and the business council, and they said, yes, please come help us. So it was a little bit of a kind of push-pull. There are a lot of different groups in Fresno that are involved, and there's other groups doing other similar things in Fresno. So it's an interesting relationship. The Mennonite farmers are one of the key stakeholder groups that have been pushing for this. There's also the Hmong farmers that are working with the food commons. Any other questions? Yes?
What do we need to do to establish a food commons core at the new Palamanui campus?
Oh, that's a great idea. Well, talk with me afterward. And Larry Yee and some of the visionaries of the food commons, we're next going to Atlanta and setting up the food commons in Atlanta. And I think Hawaii would be a great place to do it. There's a really good structure here, a very good model, and the financing is starting to come together. So once the Fresno project it's gaining traction. We just got a big grant from the government, and also our grant from the Schmidt Family Foundation was renewed.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
And also, just so you guys know, that we do have a local CSA, and that's what Maureen does too, also down in South Kona. So, okay, what we're going to do is we take a break so you guys can go get some water, you can, use the facilities, and then when we come back, we're going to do our panels. So go ahead and take about 10 or 15 minutes and then come on back.